A retired secret agent saves a plane from being hijacked by a dangerous terrorist after his wife was killed in a similar incident. Charles Rane, a notorious British criminal, committed every crime imaginable, but despite his criminal record, he was never caught because he was extremely skilled at escaping the police. We see him later in an operating room surrounded by many surgeons because he wanted to undergo surgery to change his appearance. And this was his first time. It was his 10th. When the chief surgeon entered to anesthetize him, Charles refused the anesthesia and said he loved the pain and enjoyed it, meaning this insane criminal would undergo a full surgical procedure without anesthesia. At the same time, the police arrived and surrounded the building where Charles Payne was, as someone had tipped them off about his location. Before they began the raid, the police commander met with him and warned that Charles was a professional killer who could kill many men without using a weapon. They then went up to the 13th floor to arrest Charles before the doctors started the surgery. Charles sensed the police's presence, took a scalpel from the doctor, killed him, and when the police entered the operating room, they didn't find Charles. Charles escaped, dodged their bullets, broke the glass, and jumped from the 13th floor. Despite the great height, Charles landed unharmed and ran like a horse, but the police cars were faster and managed to corner him and arrest him after 15 years of pursuit. We then moved to a plane where we see a beautiful flight attendant named Marta. Marta was checking on the passengers to see if they needed anything. Suddenly, a suspicious man appeared, pulled a gun from his pocket, took Marta hostage, and threatened to kill her if his demands weren't met. But Marta was brave, hit him in the leg, and one of the passengers managed to take the gun from the criminal. Afterward, everyone on the plane clapped, and we learned this was just a simulation to train the flight attendants to handle similar incidents. We then find out that the suspicious man was named John Cutter, a retired secret agent with extensive experience in such crimes. Later, Sly, the airline company's manager, appears, takes John, and they walk together. It was clear they were very close friends. While walking, Sly asked John to return to work, but John refused, saying he wouldn't sacrifice himself for anyone else. Sly then offered him a job managing the airline security. John thought about the offer briefly and agreed immediately when Sly said he'd only work twice a month. On the other side, we see Charles in a cell, talking to his lawyer, who tells him he'll soon be sent to California to be executed by electric chair, and that his only way out is to pretend to be insane. Unfortunately for the lawyer, Charles didn't like the idea, attacked him, beat him to death, and kept saying, "I'm not crazy." We then moved to John, standing and thinking, and we go back to a flashback from 5 years ago. We see John and his wife shopping in a supermarket when a crazy robber entered, threatening the supermarket owner with a gun. John didn't stand idly by and, like any honorable man, intervened, raising his gun at the robber. Unfortunately, the robber took his wife hostage and threatened to kill her if John didn't lower his gun. Despite John doing what the robber wanted, the robber shot his wife anyway. John shot and killed the robber, but when he went to check on his wife, he found her dead. This incident caused him immense trauma, leading him to quit his job as a secret agent in the intelligence service and isolate himself for months. In the present, John prepared for his first day at work, which involved disguising himself as a regular passenger, boarding the plane with the others, and being responsible for their safety against hijacking incidents. John did so and took seat number 57 on the plane. By chance, 2 FBI agents were on the plane to transfer Charles to his execution location. The flight was heading California, and there were 2 flight attendants, Marta, whom we saw earlier, and another, more beautiful one named Sabrina. On the plane, a young child was playing with Charles, pretending his hand was a gun and shooting an imaginary bullet at him. Charles played along, pretending to be dead, then made his hand into a gun. But when he shot an imaginary bullet, his handcuffs were visible, terrifying the child and some passengers. They began asking if it was safe, and Sabrina came to reassure them that everything was fine. Sabrina reassured me personally. After a while, Sabrina called a strange-looking man and asked him to bring her the special food. He brought her a strange metal suitcase. Meanwhile, John, annoyed by the woman sitting next to him, decided to go to the bathroom. As soon as he locked the door, Sabrina came with the special food cart, and we learned the metal suitcase contained a gun. She approached the 2 FBI agents and shot them in the head, causing chaos on the plane. At the same time, Charles stood up, removed his handcuffs, and 3 other criminals stood up, threatening the passengers with guns to make them quiet. Here, we discover that Charles had planned everything from the start. When he learned he'd be transferred to California via a civilian airline, he hired people from the company and planned what was happening now. Charles then entered the cockpit, killed one of the pilots to scare the other and gain control, and spoke into the microphone, announcing to passengers that he had hijacked the plane, would change its course, and they'd be fine if they followed his orders. John heard all this action from the bathroom and, despite being terrified of the hijacking, managed to use one of the plane's phones to inform his friend Sly about what was happening. He attacked one of the criminals, took his weapon, and used him as a human shield, standing in front of Charles. But Charles didn't stay quiet, took Marta as a human shield, and they both stood facing each other. Charles killed one of the passengers to show John he wasn't joking, and fired another shot at John, but it hit his criminal accomplice instead. John and Marta took advantage of the situation, escaped, took the elevator, and went down to the cargo hold. There, they encountered the man who delivered the special order to Sabrina. John attacked him and pinned him against the wall, but the man pretended to be innocent and a company employee. John let him go, and in that moment, the criminal pulled a knife from his pocket and attacked John. They fought, but in the end, John defeated him, broke the door with him, tied him up, and went with Marta to the plane's electronics room. John had a plan to empty the plane's fuel tank, forcing it to make an emergency landing at the nearest airport. Marta opposed the idea, saying it could destroy the plane, but John insisted it was the only way to stop it. Marta reluctantly agreed, and they went to the landing gear area, the best place to jump from when the plane landed. Their plan succeeded. The fuel ran out, and the plane was forced to make an emergency landing at the nearest point. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, Sly and his team discovered the plane would make an emergency landing at a small airport in a place called Lucy. Sly didn't waste time, took a helicopter, and headed there. At the landing gear area, John and Marta were waiting for the plane to land so they could jump. The plane landed, but before they could jump, they discovered one of the criminals had set an ambush, pushed John off the plane, and kidnapped Marta again, locking her with the hostages. Moments later, 2 police officers arrived and arrested John. Despite John swearing 1,000 times that he was one of the good guys, no one believed him, and they took him away. Meanwhile, Charles contacted the police, and Biggs, the police chief, answered. Charles stated his demands, saying he needed the plane refueled within 10 minutes, and in return, he'd release 100 passengers. Biggs didn't agree, so Charles killed 5 passengers to show he wasn't bluffing, forcing Biggs to comply. At that moment, the police brought John to Biggs, who was convinced John was one of the criminals. Charles made a move that confirmed Biggs' suspicions, lying and saying John was one of his men who betrayed him. Hearing this, Biggs ordered his officers to lock John in the basement until they figured out what to do with him. But John was stronger, defeated them all, escaped on a motorcycle, and headed to the plane's landing site. After the plane was refueled, Charles released 100 hostages as promised, took advantage of the chaos, and escaped with 2 of his men, blending into the crowd and heading to a nearby festival. Finally, American intelligence reached a control tower, where the group's leader demanded a detailed report from Biggs. When he learned the police had arrested John, he was furious, called them idiots, and told them John was one of them. We returned to the festival, where John secretly followed the criminals. Unfortunately, one of them spotted him and shot at him, but the bullet hit someone else, causing chaos at the festival. John had to ride the Ferris wheel, chased by one of the criminals. A fight broke out, ending with the criminal falling from the Ferris wheel and dying. John then surprised Charles, attacked him, and with help from his intelligence colleagues, arrested him and took him for interrogation. There, Sly congratulated his friend John on the achievement, but they didn't know the problem wasn't over yet. Charles told the officers present that they had to let him go, or the criminals on the plane would kill the hostages one by one. John tried to negotiate with him, but to no avail. The officers had to return Charles to the plane to save the hostages' lives, but they had a plan to deploy snipers on a nearby building to target and kill the criminals when the moment was right, with John supervising the mission. In the next scene, we see Charles return to the plane with 2 intelligence officers, but as they climbed the stairs, the snipers shot the officers. We then discover that the criminal who escaped from the festival had killed the original snipers and taken their weapons, now shooting at all the officers present. A battle ensued between the police and this criminal, with many officers dying, but they managed to kill him in the end. The plane began to take off, but John didn't give up. He and Biggs rode a police car and chased a plane. John planned to enter the plane through the landing gear hatch, and despite the danger, it was the only way. Nothing is too difficult for the film's hero, and John managed to enter the plane to the landing gear hatch, reach the cargo hold, kill one of the criminals, and sneak behind Sabrina, hitting her and knocking her out. Now, Charles was the only one left. Before confronting him, John went to the cockpit, told the pilots to change course, and return to Lucy Airport, then faced Charles. They fought fiercely, and although John was well trained, Charles was strong too. During their fight, a bullet hit one of the plane's windows, causing a pressure failure, and the main door broke. Marta held on with all her strength to avoid falling out of the plane. Fortunately, John acted quickly, took Charles to the broken door, hit him with a kick, and threw him out of the plane. Finally, the chaos ended, and all the passengers celebrated the terrorists' deaths. John contacted Control Tower, informing them he had killed Charles, which thrilled everyone present. In the film's final scene, the plane landed safely and all the passengers disembarked. As for John, he avoided the media because he didn't like showing off, took his new girlfriend Marta, and left. Sly spoke to the media, saying he was responsible for saving the plane. And here, we reach the end of our film. Thanks for watching.